On a huge honour to have Dr. Harold Kandler. He made Aliyah a few years ago from England to Israel. He's a British dentist, and he's going to show an amazing article which he shared with the Times of Israel, the online edition, on the 14th of Kislev. Why it was such a significant day. I'll leave you to him.
Okay, well, thank you, Rabbi Michael, for that introduction. 14th of Kislev to most people is not a very special day, but for myself and my wife it's momentous because it's the day we made Aliyah 4 years ago. And this is a synopsis of what's written on the Times of Israel blog on the 14th of Kislev, obviously under my name. So basically it took me over 60 years to make Aliyah. Baruch Hashem, we finally made it to Israel to live with our children and our grandchildren. From my earliest childhood memories, I always wanted to come and live in Israel, but unfortunately, through various circumstances, it never happened. But here's just a few of the memories and a little bit about my Aliyah story. My Zayda, his great friend, was Chazan Maharovich, the Chazan of the famous great synagogue, Duke's Place. He made what we now call a birkon in 1937, which he put sheet music in. And for Shir HaMalos, it says to be sung to the tune of the Hatikva. That's 11 years before the state was declared. My first visit in Israel was 1967, a mere 6 months after the war. I remember going to the Kotel, where people would talk about the Wailing Wall. Now we talk about the Western Wall, the Kotel, and you could go and daven at the Kotel. I remember seeing in Gaza, where they had an equivalent of Eros in Piccadilly Circus. There's a man with a sword pointing, I believe it was Tel Aviv, I don't know who's I believe it was Tel Aviv, and Sahal had taken it down, so all that was left was the base of it, the plinth. And then when we went over into Judah and Shomron, you could see the Arabs they were sitting on their backsides, and whereas the Jaffa was so big, the oranges on their trees were so much smaller. I get back to Israel next time, 1973, we get to the Kotel, I'm a bit lost. Why? Because the Kotel Plaza had been built. It hadn't been built 6 months after the war. Now anyone who comes to the Kotel takes all these things for granted. It never was such, nor could you actually go and daven, or even go into the old city. There's so much we take for granted, and we really shouldn't. One of the big things post-67 was desire to associate with Israel, and if you saw something Israeli, if it was a Jaffa or a Spanish, you've got to buy the Jaffa. You've got to do anything Israeli, buy sabra liqueur. One of the things in our shul was they decided to daven with the Sephardi pronunciation, which works great till you get to kamatz katan. So sometimes the kamatz, the vowel is pronounced ah, but sometimes pronounced oh, as in the word kol. Well, if you're born in Israel or you're an expert at grammar, it's very easy. If not, it's a bit tricky. However, the Rinat Yisrael Siddur came out, and it had the way you pronounced it as an oh in a bold font. Great. Get to Israel, we buy one. They said Ashkenaz or Sfarad. I said Ashkenaz. Take it back to England. Yes, it was Ashkenaz for people who live in Israel, not for people who live in the diaspora, where the service is different. That Siddur sat on my bookshelf from 1973 to 2020, never giving up hope of using it in Israel. The edges are brown because it's old, but internally those pages were absolutely fresh. It was a magnificent thing for me to be able to come and daven with it. A couple of other quick stories. 1973, I volunteered to come out in the war. It was all going great till the Jewish agency asked my age, and when they said I was underage, they wouldn't allow me to come, obviously. But that mirrored what my father did when he volunteered for the British Army to try and find his brother, who was a prisoner of war. So it goes on. We came to Israel in the middle of COVID. It was very, very difficult. We couldn't have a farewell party. We literally said goodbye to friends through our window. But two cousins decided the night before Motzei Shabbat, they came with pizza, with eclairs, one of my favourites, and drinks. And we had the party with them. Another cousin who came, talking to each other through mobile phones, through the window. It was incredibly sad. You couldn't give people you've known all your life a hug. The next day, of course, Aliyah Day, people would come to the house, they decorated it with flags outside. We knew nothing about it when we got out of the building. It was lovely. One of my young friends, he unfortunately has his own challenges in life. He gave an impromptu speech. It was absolutely heartrending, and you couldn't even go and give him a hug. My mechutin took me to the airport. Again, no hugs. We get on the plane. It doesn't seem terribly busy. The staff were in hazmat suits, and we weren't allowed to eat anything or to eat anything because of the risk of COVID from literally the time we entered Heathrow to when we left Ben Gurion. But all we could think of, come on, we're on the road. We sent a video message to our children from the plane before we took off. We get to Ben Gurion. The procedure was normally you have an interview, but that was not going to happen. You're supposed to be given all your documents. Ours weren't there. We waited for ages. Literally, the only people in Ben Gurion were myself, my wife, the man from the Sochnut, a porter and a driver. In Intifada, the airport was busier. Finally, after an hour plus, get out, and we're on the way. The driver then stops at a roundabout and says, "You're there." Well, it's a roundabout, there's no buildings. In Beit Shemesh, the roads begin with the word Rehov. In Ramat Beit Shemesh, where Rabbi Michael and I live, it's Nachal. And he's telling us that Rehov, Nachal, they're all the same thing. Eventually he was persuaded to reset ways. We arrived, we knew in the right road because our children and grandchildren were lining the street with sparklers. Again, no hugs. But we were here, thank God. Neighbours in the block of flats we were renting saw some sort of simcha. They put on all the extra lights to be part of it, and it really was the culmination of a dream. So finally we've arrived. People sing B'Shavu Vanim. It's very, very emotive. And we look out the window every morning and say, thank God, we bless Hashem that we are here. Despite everything that's happening, there's nowhere in the world I'd rather be. You have to have an ID card. I always tell people I don't have a Tudat Zahut, which is the Hebrew for an ID card. I have a Tudat Zchut. Play on the words. Zchut means it's a merit, it's an honor to have the ID card. So the rest of the story, if you look online on Times of Israel, 14th Kislev in my name, and I want to take every opportunity of wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom, Chanukah Sameach, and hope to see you here soon. Thanks, Michael.
Amen.